are in. It is official. If you're watching this on YouTube, well, you can see firsthand. If you're listening to it on Podbean, Dr. Rob and myself are officially wearing Sorry Dave t-shirts. They are in.
They're fucking good-looking shirts.
They really are good-looking shirts, and they're comfortable shirts.
Oh, my God. I want all my t-shirts this material.
So if you are wondering and where you can get a Sorry Dave t-shirt, and there are 4 t-shirts total in our store, okay? We have a shirt that is Sorry Dave, hashtag Sorry Dave, which I think will be the most popular, right?
Yeah, that's the one people have been asking
Yeah,
for.
people still say they'll end tweets or they'll end emails with, hey, Sorry Dave. We have another one that just is very generic, and they come in like a charcoal gray and a red. And they both have white lettering. Another one says, it's called Life, Grab a Helmet, which is, I think, you know what, it can be, life can be
and
a combat.
And that was a Coach Farley line.
Yeah, that was a Mark Farley, who's the head coach at Northern Iowa. Who I was doing an interview with him, and he's so intense. He's just into it. He's like, hey, man, it's called Life, grab a helmet, just get going, you know? And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. My favorite one, actually, besides the Sorry Dave, we have another one with, I think, 5 different types of beer steins and glasses.
Yeah, that's a cool T-shirt.
And it says diversified portfolio on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you like beer, it's the beer guy T-shirt.
Yes. And then there's another one that says, win or lose, we drink booze, because we drink a lot of booze on there.
And at least Nebraska loses a lot.
Well,
we didn't this weekend, but.
So I do want to thank our partners on this one, Raygun Custom. So Raygun has a store in Omaha. They have a store in Des Moines, Kansas City, Chicago, I think Cedar Rapids. It's very simple. You just go on the website, you make your order, and they'll ship it right to you. Full disclosure, all the t-shirts are $25. And this is a good quality t-shirt. It's a
comfy shirt.
Yeah, it
really is.
It's not a Gildan shirt. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which God bless them, but I mean, every high school sports team, that's the brand they use. So if you've got a high school shirt with your kid's sports team logo, cheerleading, whatever on there, that's what it is.
Well, and that's the thing. You're probably going, $25 for a T-shirt. Well, Jesus. First of all, we went with a really high-quality T-shirt. And, you know,
it's a nice shirt.
And somebody's got to print it. And
guess what? Somebody's going to ask you, what's the Sorry Dave all about?
And that becomes a conversation starter. So
there you go.
When somebody asks you, you have to say, well, it's apologizing for saying fuck, shit, piss, whatever you want to say. And then you say, hey, this is part of my favorite podcast, which is the Doc Talk Sports podcast.
And it's on there. It's kind of small.
Yeah, it's kind of small because I wanted the Sorry Dave to really just stick out.
Sorry Dave's the thing.
Now, when I was talking to the good folks, Mike Draper over at Raygun Custom, I go, you know, what's your realistic expectation of selling shirts? I mean, I've never been in the T-shirt business before. My son was giving me shit because I'm like, well, I'm just going to buy a heat press and I'm going to be like the old Shirt Shack. Remember the Shirt Shacks?
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, well, I'm just going to, you know, I can just get them all digitally printed. I'll do my own iron-ons here and we'll ship them out. And my son's looking at me, Owen's going, don't be an idiot, Dad. Just don't be an idiot. Don't buy something you don't need to buy.
There's modern solutions to modern problems.
Yeah, because then I would have like, you know, I'd have to stock T-shirts and all this other stuff. And
it's a space killer. It happens quick.
Now, so Mike was perfectly honest. He goes, you know, it depends. He goes, but, you know, if you sell 40 T-shirts, you should be happy. I said, 40? Maybe it's because we have, you know, thousands of listeners each and every week, and people have been following us for a number of years, that I think more than 40 people are going to buy a Sorry Dave
hope.
T-shirt.
I mean, it's a cool T-shirt. And like I said, it's fucking comfy as hell.
It is. So if you are looking for a place to purchase the Sorry Dave T-shirts or one of the other 4, click the link that's in the description on the Podbean description or the description on YouTube. You won't be disappointed. You'll make the order. They'll ship it right to you. And you can, and then once you start getting your T-shirts, buy 2. I mean, you know, don't buy one. Why buy one when you can
save
buy 2?
On shipping.
Or buy all 4. Yeah, I mean, the more you buy, you'll save on shipping. But start sending us photos of where you wear your T-shirt. I mean, it could be inside. It could be inside Memorial Stadium. It could be a lot of different places.
Wear it to a Husker game.
My question is, do you think this one would sell? Because I still want to do this one. Steve Peterson sucks T-shirt. And a T-shirt that says "I blame Harvey Perlman."
I actually think those would sell.
Okay, I will get on those and get those.
Yeah, I think that one would actually work. I know I swear to God, somebody on Twitter had actually mentioned that, like a Harvey Perlman one.
We can make that happen, no problem, man. I mean, it's a matter of just sending the design off and getting it up there, and it would be funny to see somebody show up at a Husker basketball game or a Husker football game with a "I Blame Steve" or Harvey Perlman T-shirt. Yeah. I think it would be in that red.
And, that'd be awesome.
And the Steve Peterson Sucks T-shirts. I think that would be classic.
I need I'm like, we'll do a discount if you can prove you're actually currently working for or a student in the University of Nebraska Law College. And you get the Harvey Perlman.
Oh, yes, because he's still teaching. People forget that he already had tenure like in the law school. So when he stopped being chancellor, he's like, well, I'm going to take my year sabbatical and go back to being a professor in the law school.
Yeah, I think he still hangs around campus.
And the truth, it's funny that this transition to this, because I actually got into a discussion about the coaching search at Nebraska this week. And don't worry, folks, we're going to get to the Indiana win. We've got all the time in the world. We're recording on a Sunday morning, and we're having our breakfast beer, which is a West Coast coffee and cocoa stout.
It's an Iowa beer.
And it's
chocolate
good.
Coffee stout with vanilla beans.
But it was interesting because we were talking about the coaching search, and I was talking to one of my good Iowa State friends, who's like, Campbell's not coming. They offered Campbell a boatload of money, and Campbell laughed at him. So then we got into this discussion of unrealistic expectation of Husker fans and donors. And I said, I think you are mistaken about what has happened since 2004. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, I believe, and I want your opinion on this, I believe that none of the firings at Nebraska were donor or fan driven. They were all administrative driven. Steve Peterson came in
100%.
Yeah, and I go, I don't know what you've heard or what you think, but the truth is the donors and the fans did not drive the firing of Solich. They would have stuck with Bill Callahan if Steve Peterson wouldn't have gotten fired. If Steve Peterson, I think he would have got another year.
I don't know. The end of that, I mean, there was some play in here. I mean, at the very end of that 2007 season, it was kind of a train wreck, and I don't think there was, I truly don't think there was any salvaging it.
Well, but I think that was both administration and coaching,
but I mean,
right?
It started with administrative decisions being made by Peterson that led us to the latter half of the 2007 season. And I say that also in the sense it was administrative reasons that led to the latter half of the 2017 season where the Mike Riley era was just tanking in flames. Yep. That was a Harvey Perlman, Sean Eichhorst debacle.
Well,
that happened 3 years prior,
and
2.5 years prior.
And Bo Pelini getting fired was an administrative decision.
That was and see, that's the thing. I mean, there's whether it's whether the train wrecks at the end of the era or the start of the era, it started with these administrative decisions. I mean, you make a great point about Solich because that was nothing other than the fact that Solich and Peterson hated each other's guts, and it was mostly, I think, more on the Peterson side.
Yeah.
And Steve was just like, yeah, this isn't my guy. I don't like him. We've never gotten along. I don't want him here working for me. I'm going to get rid of this guy. Well, 4 years later, it's the tail end of the 2007 season as that season's absolutely going down in flames. And it's the 2007 at that point, what set that off was that administrative decision. So you can't blame Callahan getting fired on fans and donors. You got to blame the end of the Callahan era. That still falls on Steve Peterson.
But it was a fascinating conversation to me because it made me realize, okay, the national or even regional perception of Nebraska is that fans and donors are unrealistic, like Auburn-like. I'm like, oh no. The reason this hasn't worked is because the culture within the administration, both at a higher level, chancellor level, and the athletic director level, has been fucked up for a long, long time.
Well, it has been, especially in terms of how they view athletics and what athletics can do for a university.
Oh, sorry, Dave, by the way.
Sorry. It was one of those things where, I mean, you go back through, I think, the better part of the 70s and 80s. I think Nebraska, from an administrative standpoint, understood what a successful athletic department does for a university, as well as the types of dollars that's bringing in. I mean, you've talked a lot about, so your daughter is an administrator at Ole Miss.
Well, she's the marketing director for
The housing
student
department?
housing. Yeah. So your dad was in student housing.
Exactly. So she has talked at length about how when you look at enrollment numbers, which that's a direct linear relationship with dollars.
Well, let me relay the story. When my daughter went to work at Ole Miss, she came in and there were 2 dorm buildings that were completely empty.
They
And
just didn't. They had them shut down.
They had them shut down because enrollment was so far down. Okay. And then the next year, she's like, Dad, they're putting a lot of pressure on me to retain sophomores and juniors to try to stay in the dorm because that's the only way you can keep. Listen, housing and food is a financial driver for universities.
For most universities, the 2 departments that even
Yes.
remotely make money at all, housing and athletics. And athletics, even then, it's a little sketchy.
So she's, that's a lot of pressure for, a young person to go, how do I retain sophomores and juniors who want to live off campus anyway? In comes Lane Kiffin. Within now 2 years, housing is completely full and they're considering building new dorms.
Well, and you had said going into, I think it was actually going into this, the 2022-23
They had no place to
season,
put people.
You said they had something like 900 students that they were looking
Yes.
for housing for.
Yes. That's crazy.
That's amazing. But that's what athletics does. I mean, it's sometimes, I'm not saying you got to sacrifice the quality of academics, but sometimes you have to understand athletics, sometimes the tail does wag the dog a bit when it comes to dollars.
Absolutely. And there are instances of this all over the country where athletics, that's how important athletics is. That's why when you see, why do you want game day here? Why do you want Fox Big Noon or kickoff here? Why do you even want to make an NCAA basketball tournament? Because when you get on TV and something good happens, people pay attention to what's going on.
That's advertising for your school.
Yes. And it's free advertising worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. I talked to Ben Jacobson, and when Troy Dannon, who's the athletic director at Tulane now, when Troy was the athletic director at UNI, when Northern Iowa beat Kansas in the NCAA basketball tournament, their applications for students went up like 185%. I mean, people saw UNI on TV, they beat Kansas.
One single athletic event.
Yes.
One game.
One upset.
One game.
And that's the
Has
value
that
of
effect.
athletics. But people don't, the academic world doesn't want to hear that. They want to believe that they're tenured professors and their music departments, or their engineering departments, their architectural. That's what really matters.
Nebraska, it's the Harvard of the Midwest.
Sure it is. It's a land grant
on,
school
I
like
went
some other schools in the Midwest.
Which I was perfectly happy with my education
Yes.
there. I mean, it's like I was a biology major. It's not like blood pumps in a different direction up in Boston, Massachusetts. I mean, it's still going in the same direction. So.
It is, but that's why I know people get upset about the dollars that go into athletics and the money that is spent in athletics, but it's important for the overall survival of the university. It really is.
Well, I mean, if you look at Nebraska, money flows from the athletic department out into the rest of the university.
So Iowa State,
yeah,
yes.
and I think that happens at most places. So you can't sit here, because I see the argument a lot like, hey, why are you cutting funding to the English department? Cut it to the football team. They got enough money. It's like, no, you don't understand. The football team's already paying for your library.
And it's not taking any state funds anyway to fund itself.
Well, at least at a school like Nebraska.
Yes, and some do. I understand that.
Yeah, some do. Nebraska doesn't. Nebraska is one of the very few that tends to run in the black most years.
I mean, let's use an example of the way things can turn around. Kansas is now relevant. Kansas is now ranked and 5-0 on the season. I guarantee you, because College Game Day is going to Lawrence, Kansas next week. It's not like Kansas had an enrollment problem anyway, right? I mean, the campus in Lawrence is one of the best college campuses in the country.
Great campus, great academics. They got a pretty solid basketball team.
But now they've been wanting to redo Booth Stadium down there. It's just a matter of time before that money starts flowing. It's a shithole. It's a shithole.
I never had a problem with their stadium. I always thought it was kind of
it
was a fun place to play. Now I say that That was 30 years ago. So it's
the locker room blows for the visiting team.
It does. The locker room did suck.
Now, I will say there's not a bad seat in the whole place.
No.
And there used to be a track around it, but they really want to modernize it. It hasn't been updated in a way that brings it up to, I don't know, what should we say, 2022 levels.
Not even close.
But
which honestly, in that sense, it was ancient. I mean, when we played there in the 90s, it was old and completely outdated by 1990s era tech when we played there in the 90s.
I mean, the only thing they've done is they put on a really nice press box and they got an indoor facility in the back. So, I mean, but what I'm saying is more people will become attracted to Kansas University because the football team. People want to go where it's fun. When Owen was going to school at KU, there was nobody at the games. There was like 10,000 people.
Winning's fun.
It really, really is. Speaking of winning, Nebraska finally got a win in the Big Ten last night. We're recording this on Sunday, beating Indiana, Rob. And
I see you just pulled the grades up.
Well, I pulled the grades up because, believe it or not, I had this idea. I was driving home. This was after the first game. I'm just trying to, how can we get more engagement on social media and all this other stuff? And I said, Rob, why don't you do a report card? And lo and behold, Rob, your weekly report card on games is one of the most, people wait for your report card to come out. And you're a tough grader.
Well, I'm trying to be honest here. I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this. I mean, it's one, I want to be realistic.
True.
And there's a difference between winning a game and winning a game against a good team. I mean, there's good wins, there's ugly wins, there's bad wins. There's losses where I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this. Kent State's loss to Georgia was a good loss. They hung in there with a really good SEC team till the end of the game. And that's, I hate the whole good loss analogy, but I mean, there's factors that play into this other than just the win or the loss. I mean, and even in a bad loss, there were things I looked at in that Oklahoma game where, I mean, I kind of flunked everybody for the most part that week. But
by the way, Oklahoma's shit.
Yeah, they're not a very good team. Which, again, it goes back to the whole, I know we keep, a lot of people joke about the Nebraska curse here, where, what is it? It's sort of like that movie, The Ring. It's like you watch them play, like within a week, you're doomed. God, yeah, Oklahoma, that's back-to-back losses. But, I mean, TCU just dismantled that defense. And I actually thought that was the better part of that Oklahoma team was the defense.
I mean, we were watching the Iowa game yesterday, and here I'm watching Max Duggan, the quarterback from TCU, who's from Council Bluffs, Lewis Central, going,
Lewis Central does not fuck around.
And here's the deal. I'm watching Spencer Petras, not very good, and now he was serviceable yesterday, but he didn't make any big plays. I'm watching Max Duggan just run all over the place, throw all over the place. I'm like, that's the type of...
Why did we not get that?
That's what I was thinking. It's exactly what I was thinking.
You do realize I got plenty of buddies who are Nebraska fans who sit around and wonder, this was going back 2, 3, 4 years ago, going, why did Max Duggan not go to Nebraska? Well, they hardly talked to him at all. They put zero interest into his recruitment.
And Adrian Martinez was the guy.
Yeah. Well, and I get that.
You don't want to, the same reason he didn't go to Iowa State, because Brock Purdy was there. He wasn't going to make a dent.
I mean, there's kind of this mindset I have about recruiting where if you want to be a good school, if you want to do justice to your fan base and to your mission as an athletic program, you got to lock down the local guys.
I 100% agree.
I mean, I look at the guys who've come out of Nebraska. When you look at Avante Dickerson going to Oregon, you look at Micah Riley Ducker going to Auburn, you look, the other Bell West kid who went to Oklahoma, playing tight end down there. You look at Keegan Johnson going to Iowa. I mean, you look at all these guys who've gone to other schools over the years. The thing that I worry about is when I look at this is so there's like 4 or 5 Power 5 guys I just rattled off all right there. You got Jay Ducker, who's down at Memphis. I mean, he'd be at worst he'd be a good third down back for Nebraska right now. it'd be nice having these guys stay in the area, and they just don't put that kind of emphasis into keeping a lot of these local guys here. A lot of lip service has gotten paid to it over the past several years. It hasn't really happened, though, and that's the thing I worry about.
Before we dive into the grades, I do want to remind everybody that the Doc Talk podcast is presented by Betfred Sports. I'm telling you right now, online gambling is coming to Nebraska, and online sports betting will be here. And when it does, Betfred Sports will be in the state of Nebraska. I promise you that. Hope Brian Bennett's not mad at me that I just made that promise. But, Betfred Sports is now live.
Brian 100% guarantees that.
Yeah, we're putting words in his mouth. But Betfred Sports is in Iowa. So if you're in the eastern Nebraska area, you could drive across
and you want to hang out at a strip club,
or you can go, or you can just go over on Broadway and do that. But yeah, you're right. The strip club on the way to the airport, half of it is in Iowa, the other half is in Nebraska. Just go on the Iowa side. It's geotagged. It knows exactly where you're at. Download the app in the Apple and Google Play stores, and you can just start off fresh with a free bet. That means when you download the app and you set up a brand new account, enter the promo code DocTalk, and we're going to give you a $20 free bet. That's a $20 free bet. That $20 free bet's good in the state of Iowa. It's good in the state of Colorado. It's good in the state of Arizona. It's a great player experience, and their customer service department is second to none. And the truth is, they love sports. And Betfred is, now you're going to go, it's a UK company, but I'm telling you, man, you can bet on anything from Korean baseball, Japanese baseball, rugby,
which the next
tennis.
time we have a COVID shutdown.
Yes.
Korean baseball. We were all watching Korean baseball.
Ask Kyle Peterson
for months there.
But and if you want to know more about Betfred Sports, watch our Behind the Point Spread show live on YouTube's 8 o'clock on Wednesdays, and with Scott Spreitzer out of Las Vegas. But Betfred Sports is the presenting sponsor of the Doc Talk podcast, and always good to have Connor Orr, our NIL expert, on board. He's a litigator. He's an attorney with Orr, Horrigan, and Flinte, and we'll be hearing from Connor shortly. He's got some deals he just signed up, and always. I was over at Husker Hounds. Believe it or not, you ready for this? My daughter Mary became the first Justice child to get a Nebraska sweatshirt.
Smart kid.
Now she didn't get it with Huskers on it. It only said Nebraska on it, but it's black and it's red. And she goes, I don't want it to say Huskers. I know, but some people would say, I went into Scott. And
it's not like she's going to wear it to a Hawkeye game. People are going to be like, oh, you're a Hawkeye fan.
So I was down at Husker Hounds the other day, and Scotty's he's a great dude and so much selection.
His product line is awesome.
That 84th Street store is massive.
It's a great store. And the thing I keep going, as big of a Husker fan as I am, and I mean, obviously, it's called Husker Hounds. You know what it's geared towards. He'll get anything for you. I mean, if you go in there and you're like, hey, listen, can you get this and this, but in Iowa State, he'll get it for you. I mean, the story I always tell, I got my favorite winter park. It's one of these. He carries a whole line of Columbia gear. Like I said, his stuff is nice stuff. So I love the big layered Columbia brand parkas. And so Joel Wilkes saw it. One of his kids, they live in Portland, Oregon. His kids you live in Oregon, you're Oregon Ducks fans. He was like, I need that, but I need it in Oregon Ducks, not Nebraska for my kid. Dude, one call to Scott. Scott got him an Oregon Ducks version of it. You can get anything.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm like, I need to find out if I can get that, but for like Augustana. Because it's going to get cold up there quick. It was 70 degrees and sunny yesterday for the game, but it's going to get cold quick at some point. It's going to start snowing up there in Sioux Falls, and I'm going to need an Augustana version.
But look at it this way. Ryan is redshirting this year, so there could always be one of those cold days you go, you know what, Ryan, you're not playing. So your mom and I are just going to stick around at home this weekend.
Yeah. Like, hey, we're probably more...
Are you a helicopter parent?
Not a helicopter parent by any means, but we like the experience of it. They just they do it right up there.
Well,
the tailgating's a blast. The parent community, there's a really strong football parent community up there, and they do not, they fuck around with the tailgating. It's awesome.
See, that's what, and I never wanted to be the helicopter parent, but you're right. There was something about that college atmosphere. Now, my daughters went to New Orleans,
And it's
right?
which is yeah. That was what I was going to bring up. You can't tell me you don't sit around there and say, "Ah, God, let's take a trip to New Orleans.
Well,
We're going to hang out."
When Owen was at KU, I wanted to go down all the time,
Yeah.
but he didn't want me down there. He's like, "Yeah, I don't
He's
think I
over
want."
on the other side
Yeah.
of the screen,
Yeah, he's like, I don't
rolling his eyes right now.
And when we did come down, I never got the feeling that, hey, glad to have you guys here.
But I mean, from a parent standpoint, there's a lot of that stuff. It's like with Augustine, I'm like, I want to go check out some volleyball and basketball. They're going to have D1 hockey, not this year, but the 23-24.
That's a big deal.
It's going to be they got hockey going in. The arena's going up right on campus. They're going to have their own arena. It's going to be massive and it's going to be beautiful.
Let me guess, Stanford Health is building that. It seems like Stanford Health is building everything up there.
Sanford pumps a lot of money into the community in general up there. So you got Sanford, Avera, two big health corporations. University of Sioux Falls, Augustana, both those schools very well supported by those corporations. I'm having a complete mind blank now. I gotta look up the arena now because there's also Midco, which is a media company up there. And Midco actually has an office here in Omaha as well too. I'm pulling up my Augustana Vikings app.
Look at you.
Look, I got the app. But yeah, I got to look that up with the arena. I'll figure it out. But it's I can't remember if Sanford actually, if it is in fact Sanford. I know they've got a title sponsor. I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know this off the top of my head.
It's okay.
It's still being constructed. They're not playing yet. It'll be coming. But it's fun. I mean, the whole kid in college thing. I mean, I got tons of Florida State gear at home. I mean, my oldest daughter is a senior at Florida State. She's on the rowing team there. It's fun. All of a sudden, we're like following Florida State academics. We're following Florida State athletics. That's cool stuff. We have fun with it.
So Nebraska beats Indiana 35-21, improves to 2-3 on the year, 1-1 in the Big Ten Conference. Nebraska runs for. Anthony Grant actually had 32 carries, gained 142 yards. He netted 136. Now, because of sacks and everything else like that, Nebraska ended up with
it's like 115.
115.
Rushing.
But let's look at Anthony Grant.
Time of possession, by the way, was great as well.
Well, the ability to run the football with Anthony Grant at 136 and the time of possession is a huge deal. However, you gave the running game on your Doc's diagnosis report card a B-. Explain the B-.
Okay, well, there's a lot of things have to play into this. And so one thing you have to take into consideration is who you're playing. And Indiana does not have a very good defense. I mean, if you want to go out there and punch out a crap ton of yardage, I mean, here's my question. Let's take an early 90s Nebraska team.
Yeah.
If we get 350 yards rushing versus Oklahoma or Colorado, is that more impressive than Nebraska getting 390 yards rushing versus, let's say, a bad KU team? Yeah, 350 against Oklahoma or Colorado is way better than 400 yards against a shitty Kansas team.
Okay.
You got to take that into consideration. I mean, that plays into the grade. Indiana's not a very good defense. They are not good at all. And Nebraska, I mean, there were times Indiana's defense rose up and did get some stops. I thought Nebraska's interior O-line did a very solid job. I like what Hickson's doing. The more I watch, the more I appreciate what Trent Hickson is doing for Nebraska right now. And if you're a fan of O-line, Nebraska football, lineman history, and what's going on down in Lincoln over the years, start paying attention to Hickson a little bit, because you got a guy who was originally a walk-on, earned a scholarship, now has the starting job at center, sitting at guard for several years. He's like a ninth-year guy, I think. But he's doing a solid job in the middle there, and he's doing it with kind of this rotating lineup of new dudes at guard, where he's gone from like Corcoran and Bando to Lutoski to now you've got Ethan Piper. I mean, it's this complete mix at the guard spot. To be able to kind of hold the center of that line together with that rotation of kind of some unproven guys at guard is not an easy thing for a center to do. And this is his first year starting doing it. So I really appreciate what he's doing. The tackle spots, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but if you really want to see my breakdown on the tackles, watch the diagnosis here, those are going to start popping up on.
Yeah, so the first one will be up Monday morning, 7 a.m. They come out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every day at 7 o'clock in the morning. You can find them on Husker Max. You can also find them on our YouTube channel. And the first one is going to be it's 3 different plays. Usually we do 1 play. We do 3 different plays here, really focusing on the tackle position for the Huskers.
It is now, and again, the ones we focus on with the diagnosis are all pass plays, but it's just the run blocking was not really, really solid there either. Indiana was able to establish an edge on several run plays, several outside run plays, and that was kind of the main reason I downgraded them. The other reason I downgraded the running game a little bit was because you still have guys like Anthony Grant, Gabe Irvin was out there, had some nice plays. These guys are doing a really good job with not the greatest blocking availability. And so I don't want to say they're completely making their own holes, but they're taking advantage of some very okay blocking up front to get some pretty impressive yardage. Honestly, I think B- is a little
generous.
That's a little generous in my opinion.
So the passing game gets a B- as well. Casey Thompson, 18 of 27. That's good. 270 yards, had 2 TDs, did have 1 interception. He got sacked 3 times, and you do have to factor that into the passing game. I will say this though, as far as the passing game goes, Trey Palmer was a bitch yesterday, man.
He wasn't, but that's again the thing is where when you're grading out, when I'm grading these, I'm not just looking at, hey, did the quarterback have a great game? Did a couple of wide receivers have a great game? Yeah, they did. One of my favorite guys on this team is Travis Vocalek at tight end. Guy, he had a lot of drops.
He did.
Now, some of these passes, the ball was not in the greatest spot. He was still able to get his hands on the ball, though, and some of those, you just got to make that catch. There was a lot of drops there at the tight end position. They get downgraded a little bit for that. The other thing they get downgraded for, when I'm grading the passing game, I'm grading the offensive line to a degree as part of that. Now, I do separate out the O-line, but I'm grading the O-line on both the run game and the passing game. That factors in as well. And so if the offensive line does not have a great day with pass protection, that's going to show up in that overall passing game grade as well. And there were several plays when, again, it was sort of a feast or famine much of the game. Thompson either had all day long to throw, or he was getting sacked. It was one of the two. There wasn't a lot of in between. There was not a lot of consistency there, and that lack of consistency is the reason that got downgraded.
Offensive line, C-. I think that's an improvement over the last 4 games, but it's not stellar. And again, as you break down in the diagnosis, Benhart and Corcoran suck.
They are, and so it's reached a point.
I'm a little more blunt than you are.
Well, it is, but I'm going to get maybe even more blunt than you are. It's reached a point. We talk about this again in the diagnosis that these guys have become what I consider a liability. So maybe they know the plays better than the other tackles on the team right now. Maybe they're understanding of the offense, who they're playing against and with, is better than other guys on the team right now. But their inability to consistently pass protect has become a liability, and you're seeing big hits on Casey Thompson. Casey's getting hit, and those add up, and you're going to look at a guy who's going to get injured here because of those 2 offensive tackles. You're seeing points being given up. So you had a sack of Purdy, that led to a fumble in the end zone that Indiana recovered to score a touchdown and keep themselves in the game. That's a liability on those tackles. And we're seeing this on a consistent basis. It's not like these guys had one bad game. Every week we could do a doc's diagnosis on the problems with Corcoran and Benhart at tackle.
Is that coaching or just ability at this point?
Well, so we kind of go into that as well too during the
This is what we call, folks,
fucking diagnosis.
This is what. Sorry, Dave. This is what we call, by the way, a deep tease. So we want you to listen to the podcast, but we also want you to go watch on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please do. We're almost to 1,000. We'd like to be to 1,000 by the end of the week.
Go watch the fucking diagnosis.
Sorry,
I
Dave.
go over this stuff.
Yes, he's a smart dude.
So I'll draw it out for you, but I mean, there's stuff where you see. So a couple things happen in the game. Benhart has a couple of series that are so bad they yank them. And for the first time with meaningful time in a game, you see Hunter Anthony get put in. So for the people who don't follow as closely, he was a portal transfer. I guess all transfers are portal transfers now, but he was a portal guy, came from Oklahoma State. He had started the better part of a season down there, I think, at one point in his career. He had some injuries. Some other guys came back from injury. He lost his starting job. Didn't look like he was going to be able to get it back with who he had in front of him, and so he ended up transferring. The guy can play football. This guy is not a bad football player by any means whatsoever. So he's somebody I was interested to see how he looked. This was the first game he got meaningful time, and it was essentially because Benhart was so fucking bad. They had to yank him. They put in Anthony, and I thought he was really solid. I mean, I thought he was very consistent. I thought he did well. I was frankly kind of excited I want to see him stay in there because I'd be curious to see how he does going forward. He may not know the plays or offense or the system as well as Benhart maybe, but his understanding of some football basics appears to be way better in terms of picking up stunts, basic run blocking, some of these skills that you got to have that I just don't see Benhart executing on a consistent basis. I did see coming from Hunter Anthony. Now, on the other side of the ball, you saw Corcoran, who had back-to-back personal fouls, which one, you're stupid if you get back-to-back personal fouls. Because if you get one, you better be watching yourself like, maybe I need to pull back a little bit and not get a second one here. They called it a punch. He basically pancaked a guy and then sat there and kind of like shoved the guy's head back down into the turf. The rest called it punching. The announcer said he slapped the guy. He was basically shoving the guy down into the turf with his face mask. You got to be smarter than that, especially when you just gave up a personal foul. So now 2 straight plays, you're responsible for 30 yards of lost yardage, and you just got yourself kicked out of the game. In comes Banks, who is probably better known for filling in on Nebraska's basketball team than he is for playing football for Nebraska. They put him in at left tackle. He did solid. I mean, again, it's a small sample size. It's not like we're looking at Banks going like, oh my God, this is the second coming of Anthony Munoz. It's like, no. But he did solid, and in terms of executing fundamental football play from that left tackle spot and keeping guys off of Casey Thompson, he did a good job at that left tackle spot, and I was frankly kind of impressed. Again, these two guys may not know the offense as well, but you're going to have a hard time making the argument to me that they're less of a or more of a liability rather than what Corcoran and Benhart are.
I think most people on your report card, which you can find on Doc's Twitter page at Doc Talk Sports, were surprised at your C+ for the defense because
I thought that was kind of generous too.
And this is why people want to know your grading scale, because this defense held Indiana to 290 yards.
Not horrible.
No, not for an Indiana offense. I mean, they like to throw the football.
Yeah.
around.
So let's break this one down a little bit. And again, they completely shut down Indiana in the second half. I totally get that. I mean, I'm not denying that, but let's talk about a few things here because you have to take into account who you're shutting down. And Indiana's not a very good team. Now they put up a shit ton of yardage. The 3-1 record they brought into Lincoln, that's seriously, that's smoke and mirrors. They're not that good. This is not like, I don't know, this is not like the third place team in the SEC. This isn't Michigan. This isn't Ohio State. They should have lost to Illinois. If you watched that game, they should have lost to Illinois. Illinois is still trying to figure out how they lost to Indiana. They've got no run game. I actually like their running back. Indiana's running back. He's kind of one of these Darren Sproles-esque guys if you watch him play.
Well, is it Sean Shivers or Jalen Lucas?
Shivers.
Shivers. And we showed him last week on the diagnosis.
Yeah. So I really like Shivers and thinking the dude's pretty solid. It's but they're not a great running team. I mean, they're not going to go in and get 320 yards on the ground. If they get 100, they are freaking ecstatic. That's a great day. They want to put yards up through the air. And so you've got a team in Indiana that's not very good to begin with. They've got a very mediocre running game. They're not going to gash you with the run. They're going to hit you with the pass, and Nebraska knew that coming in. And, oh, by the way, their top 2 wide receivers are both out injured. So this is a completely handicapped team. You know they're not going to beat you with the run. They're going to try and do everything through the passing game. So you know exactly what they're going to do. You know what? They're putting all their eggs into one basket. That's what you've got to stop. And their top 2 players are out. You got to take that into consideration. I mean, it's in the real world, everything's a little bit on a scale here.
On a curve.
Yeah, I'm grading on a curve here. So if Nebraska did what they did to Indiana, you do that against Michigan or Ohio State or, I mean, name it, not even a great team. Name an okay team for me right now.
An okay team?
Yeah, name a solid team.
Kansas.
Okay. You do that against Kansas, yeah, I'm giving you an A-. You do that against kind of a very mediocre Indiana team. Okay, that's C+. That's not bad.
And because Kansas offensively is good, I could have thrown out like NC State or something like that, right?
And it's one game. I mean, they do this for the next 6 games in a row. Yeah, I'm gonna crank your grade up on that. But, I mean, it's one game against a shitty Indiana team with no running game and your top 2 wide receivers injured. No, I'm not giving you a B+ for that.
So the next grade was the special teams, which had a block punt that went for a touchdown, and you still are giving them a B+.
I think, again, watch the diagnosis because I go over why I think that block happened. And I think there's a little bit of a bad call. I think it was like Nebraska against Iowa last year where Iowa blocked that punt. I think they had the protection called to the wrong side of the field on the punt play. And so that helped Nebraska a little bit. On the whole, it's been solid. Has it been perfect? No. I mean, I want to see some returns here. The blocking on the returns has been okay. It hasn't been great. And I want to see a kick returner for Nebraska basically say, hey, listen, we're going DeMornay Pearson-L here, and we're going to take it to the house, and we have not seen that yet. So I want to see the return game step up significantly here, and that's kind of why I haven't bumped them into that A range yet. And again, like I said, all of this is on a curve. They did great against a mediocre team, and you yourself are the special teams for a fairly mediocre team in Nebraska. I mean, and calling Nebraska mediocre right now is a little bit, again, they're not a very good football team. So for me to call them mediocre, I'm maybe being a little nice there even.
And the overall grade was a C. And I think people were, again, shocked by that with a 35-21 win.
Well, and if you average all the other grades, but I've told people 1,000 times,
there's intangibles in there.
My overall is not the average of the previous categories. It takes into a lot, like the overall is where like, okay, coaching's going into that, other intangibles, quality of the opponent, all of these things are going into that overall grade. And when you look at the overall for Nebraska, I thought the coaching was pretty good. I thought defensively, I was frankly a little bit pleasantly surprised. I mean, you're giving Bill Bush the reins as the D coordinator with 2 weeks to get ready. That's not an easy task to do. And so, I mean, I'm actually giving you a little bit of credit there. A lot of the reason it's a C, I mean, C's get degrees. I mean, C is average.
You know what they call the guy who finished dead last in medical school?
Doctor.
That's right.
Exactly. But that
wasn't you, by the way.
No, it wasn't. I did pretty solid. But that factors into this. And so, I mean, when you're looking at this, I mean, an A grade would be a win over a team that's in the top 25. You beat a top 25 team, I'm going to give you a B plus or an A. You know, you beat a crappy Indiana team at home who has no running game. Their top two players on offense, arguably top two players on offense, are both out injured. And Indiana doesn't have a very good defense either. I mean, that's a sketchy defense. They're not going to stop anybody. They've got 2 losses now. I mean, in both losses, that defense got really exposed. In their 3 wins, they got exposed to a degree as well. Indiana put up a crap ton of yardage on them. Illinois put up a crap ton of yardage on Indiana. So that defense has been consistently exposed. You have to take these things into consideration when you're giving this team a grade.
Rob, it gets really interesting from here on out. By the way, getting a win was that's a moral victory and a moral boost.
And it is. And there's some intangibles there that getting a win, period. We're kind of in this weird situation for Nebraska where you've got all of this disarray, all of these changes, and arguably the 2 worst opponents on your schedule back to back with Indiana and Rutgers.
Now, but the interesting part of this is it's a dynamic of the Big Ten West, and listen, my Iowa buddies could get mad at me for saying this. The Big Ten West is so bad that anybody can win this thing. I'm telling you right now. If you look at Nebraska's schedule, the way it's setting up. Nebraska's not a good football team. Nobody. Let me preface this by saying nobody in the West is a good football team. Nobody. There's not a good football team in the West.
Yeah, Nebraska's particularly not very good.
But Nebraska could win this based on its schedule. At Rutgers, at Purdue, Illinois at home, Minnesota at home. The only guaranteed loss to me on the schedule here is at Michigan. Michigan's pretty good.
Yeah, they are. And I agree with you.
It's bizarre because, and this is going to get into the coaching search coming up, because this could be smoke and mirrors, right? You could easily win at Rutgers. You could win at Purdue. I don't think you win at Purdue, but you could win at Purdue.
It's kind of had Nebraska's number.
Illinois destroyed Wisconsin at Wisconsin yesterday. Minnesota lost to Purdue yesterday.
Indiana should have beat. Well, I'm sorry. Illinois should have beat Indiana and managed to lose to them.
Minnesota, with Ibrahim, is a really good football team. Without Ibrahim, who didn't play yesterday.
Do you know what the injury was?
I don't.
Okay.
And I can try to find it as we're talking here. Michigan looked good yesterday. Their offensive line, big. Defense did a really good job against Iowa. But Iowa's offense is horrible. Defense is decent. But Michigan was able to run the football effectively on Iowa, which meant, to me, Iowa's defense isn't elite. It's good. It's just not elite. Wisconsin, we had Scott Spreitzer throw out there on Behind the Point Spread last Wednesday, said, hey, when Paul Chryst gets fired, we were both like, whoa, dropping a bomb.
Wait a minute.
And now I'm like, oh, he might be
knows
right.
Something.
He might be right, because getting beat at home like they got beat yesterday is not acceptable in Wisconsin people. And then the Iowa game. Listen, I think Iowa has a defense that will keep it in every single game. Nobody's going to blow out Iowa. Even Michigan didn't blow out Iowa yesterday. But that's a winnable game. I'm not going to sit there and go, "Oh, Iowa's guaranteed to beat Nebraska." Every game on there, with the exception of Michigan, is a winnable game. Every one of them.
Yeah, there's no guaranteed other than Michigan. There's no quote unquote guaranteed losses. I agree with you there, which is kind of interesting because usually we talk about, hey, who are we going to win against? We've got no guaranteed wins,
but no guarantee, and only one guaranteed loss.
Yeah, but I agree with you. That's the only guaranteed loss on the schedule is that Michigan game.
Now, which is great because you want to win a conference, you want to win a division, you want to get to the Big Ten title game. You're going to get your ass kicked by either Ohio State or Michigan. I mean, you're going to get drilled.
You really think Nebraska's got a shot to go to?
I do, and I listen. I think I snickered at the Omaha World Herald that threw it out there last week. I'm like, huh. But then you start once Minnesota got beat by Purdue, and you start going, well, hell. And then you look at the schedule up and down the whole West Division. Wisconsin gets pounded at home. You're like, nobody in the West is good.
Well, then maybe Nebraska is one of these sort of wounded animal teams that they can latch on with what they've got with Mickey, and maybe if Whipple kind of keeps developing this offense a little bit. The long ball was fun. I mean, that Trey Palmer had that 70-yard touchdown. Yeah. If they can be one of those teams that can kind of keep opponents on their heels a little bit with those types of plays, they got a chance to be in any game, I think.
Ibrahim is out with an injured ankle. He has 567 yards in 4 games. The dude's a player.
Oh, the guy's amazing. That Achilles injury, though, was a little scary because that's one of those things where it's kind of one of those freak injuries that nobody has to touch you and you can still get hurt. He has another one of those and he's out for the year again. But God, yeah, he's an incredible player. That's a true game changer.
Now, Husker fans are interesting because, and this is an interesting season. I point out, and this is kind of leading me into this discussion, is that the more they win, the more you're going to have a fan groundswell support for Mickey Joseph. You have to look at the remaining schedule. Every team sucks. Horrible with the exception of Michigan. Now, James writes in this morning, he says, the players want Mickey and we in Hell's Kitchen want Mickey as head coach. It's the first game we've seen in 5 years where everything could have gone south, even at home, but the players responded on both sides of the ball. It's time Nebraska had a black head football coach. His attitude is infectious. He clearly knows how to motivate players, and most importantly, he was taught by the greatest coach Nebraska has ever known. Hold on for a second. So was Scott Frost. All right, he was. I mean,
fair point.
Yes. Thus, here's a question: how long has it been for you since you felt this positive after a win? Do you feel positive after a win?
Not really. No, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with a lot of what we're saying here.
Well, but he goes on to say, Mickey clearly knows what it takes to win in the Big Ten. Bullshit. You beat Indiana.
He got one win. He's 1-1 as a head coach.
Now, I'm not saying he's not the right guy for the job. I'm just saying you got to back up and let this thing play out and look at the remaining schedule and go, we're playing everybody's a bad football team but one.
So let's extrapolate a little bit, Peter, because here's where the real discussion is. What if Nebraska does now, can you pull up the Nebraska schedule here? So
at Rutgers, at Purdue.
So let's do this. Let's say they beat Rutgers, lose to Purdue, beat Illinois. Let's say Ibrahim's out and they shock Minnesota in Lincoln, lose to Michigan, beat Wisconsin, and then you know what? In a massive upset in Iowa City.
It wouldn't be that massive.
No, I know. You knock off Iowa. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 more wins.
That gives you 7 for the season. You're bowl eligible.
So now you're going to finish the year 7-5, which a lot of people had said, hey, if Scott Frost goes 7-5 and goes to a bowl game,
saving his job.
saves his job another year. So that all of a sudden now, yeah, that's when shit gets interesting as far as, well, what are we going to do with the whole Mickey Joseph thing where he's the interim, and do you replace that then? Does Trev give Mickey another year or two and say like, okay, well, we're going to keep this interim thing going for a year now. How are you going to play into that? Yeah, that's when things get interesting to me. Now, I mean, even 6-6. If they go 6-6 again, I'm going to sit back and go like, okay, well, that's still kind of interesting because 6-6, odds are they go 6-6, they're going to get a bowl invite. I mean, it might be
absolutely.
It might be to a Foster Farms equivalent again. I mean,
go to the Bahamas Bowl or something like that.
Yeah, but it's a fucking bowl game. Sorry, Dave. And that, again, there was a lot of talk that, hey, Scott goes 6-6 and goes to a bowl game. We should keep him. We should keep Scott in place. So that's where it gets interesting, is if you have something like that. Now, if Nebraska finishes 4-8, even 5-7, I think it gets hard to point at Mickey and say, hey, we're going to hold on to you. Now, I don't say that in the sense of downgrading Mickey. Coming into this situation, almost anything he does to stave off a complete and utter meltdown on both sides of the ball, in my mind, that's a win, and he went above and beyond.
He goes, he likes the way Mickey holds players accountable. I think we have our next head coach. He just needs time. You've said that about everybody that's been there over the course of time, is they need time. Listen, I'm not saying he's not the right guy for the job. He does seem to have a better relationship with players, and there is something about the rawness. But again, never been a head coach before.
But yeah, and the sample size here is incredibly small. You've got, I'm willing to throw out the Oklahoma game. Scott had just been fired. You got a game of the week later. I'm not saying Oklahoma's good. They've looked ugly the last couple of weeks, but they've got some amazing athletes. And I don't think the Oklahoma that we've seen the last 2 weeks is the Oklahoma we're going to see long-term going forward. I think that's still a pretty darn good program with some decent coaches. So I'm willing to throw that game out. That leaves us, we got a sample size of 1. That's it.
Yes.
There's no way you make a decision off of that when we're talking about the fact that I think it's going to be difficult to make a decision based off of one season with Mickey as the interim head coach. I mean, like I said, he takes us all the way through the end of the year. It's going to be hard to evaluate that because, I mean, again, those circumstances are difficult. Like everybody asks me, what do you think of so-and-so as the head coach? And my answer is always like, ask me in 5 years. I'll tell you exactly what I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very important hire for Trev Alberts.
It is, but at the same time, which, I mean, that almost makes me kind of wonder a little bit. Do you give Mickey a year? Like literally, hey, we're just going to keep that interim tag on you. Take it into another year and let's see what happens.
I wouldn't take that because you want security.
He's already under contract.
Yeah, but not like Scott Frost money. True. I mean, at this point, you're going to say, well, no, I'm not going to keep an interim job because I want 3 to 5 years. If you're going to get rid of me, I need to walk out of here with $15 million. That's what I would do.
Well, yeah, I kind of have a hard time arguing against that.
Yeah. So Van writes in, and Van's a United States Marine Corps retired. He's in Emerald Isle, North Carolina. Okay. He wants to know if we've circled the wagon with UNL athletics to help cover up the fecal matter splattered by Ronnie Green, Bill Moose, Scott Frost, Fred Hoiberg, and others inside athletics. He goes, yes, I did say Green. Why isn't anyone talking about the disaster with the Regents in hiring Ronnie Green? Sure, he supposedly was all in hiring Trev Alberts, we are told, but look at what has happened to Nebraska since Green was hired. Does anyone care? And now Green is trying to deflect the shitstorm by promoting academic graduation rates.
So I don't, I've heard a rumbling of misgivings about Green here recently, and a lot of it kind of goes back to the whole Okay, they brought in Moose, brought in Frost, brought in Hoiberg. It's I'm hearing a lot of that kind of filtering up to Green. It seems a little misgiven because I look at decisions that Steve Peterson made. I look at decisions that
Harvey Perlman
made. And these were guys who were dismantling programs that had a degree of success as opposed to trying to build up a program. I don't argue against the Frost or Hoiberg hirings because at the time those hirings
home runs.
Absolute home runs. And I think anybody who did any kind of evaluation at the time considered those to be home run hires. And guess what? Sometimes home run hires don't pan out.
No, they fall short at the warning track.
Big time. And so I don't fault Green on this because I think at the time it was one of those like, all right, let's get rid of Eichhorst. We're going to get Moose in here. We think we can talk Scott into coming back as head coach. And then, hey, if it doesn't work out with Tim Miles, fuck it. Let's get the mayor in Lincoln. I mean, how awesome would that be? Everybody thought these were great decisions at the time, and the fact that they haven't panned out, or at least haven't panned out yet in Hoiberg's case, that's not because you had an administration or an administrator trying to dismantle something. I mean, when I look at Perlman and Eichhorst in regards to Bo Pelini, keep in mind, Bo Pelini, his average win, I mean, it was like 10.2 wins a year.
Yeah.
Basically, it was 10 wins a year. It was 9.8, 10.1, something like that. If you went to any Nebraska fan and said, hey, we got this coach, I mean, little guy gets pissed off on occasion, yells a lot, but shit, he's going to get you 10 wins a year on average. You taking that? Because I am. I'll take it with the spit flying into Adrian Martinez's face on the sideline at A&M.
And I get why.
Like 10 wins every year right now is better than what Iowa's currently doing. And I'm not talking about just this season, but I mean, I'm talking about the last half dozen years. That's better than what Iowa's averaged, what Minnesota's done. That's better than what Wisconsin has averaged.
And let's get,
and
by the way,
Pelini did it for 7 seasons. And we fired him because the administrators were like, yeah, we just don't like the look of this, and we don't like this guy as a person, so we're going to shit can him. That's different than Ronnie Green sitting here and like Green. Sorry, I know it sounds, I don't mean it the pun is completely unintended, but that's different than Ronnie greenlighting the hiring of Moose and Frost and Hoiberg, thinking, hey, here's our chance to have a home run hire.
Well, and let's back up and punt. It was Harvey Perlman who went behind Tom Osborne's back and hired Sean Eichhorst.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so when Bill Moose was hired, again, people loved Bill Moose because he had a little Devaney in him. He had the gift of gab. He was going to go backslap. Yeah, you could go down to the bar and have a drink with him.
He was a little old school.
People loved that. Until you started removing the peels of the onion, you're like, oh, this dude's got other problems. First of all, he's not here a lot. He rumored allegedly to drink a lot. So then you're like, but you know what? He hired Scott Frost and Fred Hoiberg. There's no two better coaches at the time that you could have said, bang, you just hit the home run. Sit back and count the money and
it's
go.
A complete apples and oranges comparison to try and make that comparison with Ronnie Green to what we saw with Perlman and Eichhorst, Steve Peterson, et cetera.
Yeah, it's I just don't think that's fair. But, hey, I do want to ask you a question because Nebraska has scored on its opening drive, I think, in 4 or 5 games this year. But then they peter out. Why is that? Because they scored yesterday right away and then petered out for a while offensively. What happens in
I don't know if there's anything really specific there. I think sometimes that's a little bit of a misguided way of looking at stuff. I mean, I think Nebraska, if anything, I think it's a little bit of a tribute to the fact that, I mean, in any game, both offensive and defensively, there's going to be a little bit of a feeling out period because it doesn't matter how much film you watch, always a good thing, not saying it's not, but until you get out there and start literally slamming into each other, you really don't know exactly what you're going to get from that opponent. And so I think if you have a team that tends to have some very good athletes, especially at some key positions, it's easy to make some plays right off the bat. And I think you see that with Nebraska. And I'd say that in the sense, I think Casey Thompson's a very, very good athlete. Trey Palmer's a really good athlete. Anthony Grant's a really good athlete. Adrian Martinez was a really good athlete, is a really good athlete. I mean, Nebraska did well. I mean, that stat, I'd be interested to go back and look at the previous 4 years, because I thought Nebraska did a pretty good job of scoring on their first or second possession under Martinez as well. It's easy to do that. Now, I think a lot of people talk about the whole concept of scripted plays where, hey, you know what, when you don't know exactly what the defense is going to do, and the defense doesn't know exactly what you're going to do, you'll have a set of plays that you'll kind of script out. Like, hey, we're going to start, here's 15 plays. We're going to run 10 or 12 of these as our first plays of the game because it's very well designed and we think it'll work against our defense. That does play in as well into the big picture, but I think it has more to do with the fact that if you've got some marginally better athletes than the opponent does, you're going to be able to do that. Once you get past that first series or two, they're able to adjust for that athleticism, make some schematic changes to account for it, and you're going to see a slowdown.
Earlier in the week, or last week, should we say, the Board of Regents approved alcohol sales at Nebraska basketball games. Listen,
it's a start.
It's a start. I'm going to be honest here. Do they just wait till Tom dies until they bring alcohol to the football stadium?
I don't know. I think it's going to happen before then, because I think you're going to see a couple things happen at some of these other sporting events. One, you're going to see the revenue that comes in. Two, you're going to see a lack of alcohol-related events.
True,
and that's kind of the test case they're looking for with all of these. Trev very specifically did it at Big Ten Wrestling Championships in Lincoln this past year. And the thing that was impressive, there were two things that Trev commented on after that. One was the revenue it brought in. Two was the lack of alcohol-related events. And that's what they're going to be looking at. They're going to give it a try with basketball, and they're going to see a lot of revenue, and they're going to see a lack of alcohol-related events, arrests, fights, public drunkenness, things like that. And they're going to go, okay, this worked out just fine. And I think after they see that after one or two seasons in basketball, then you're going to see it move over into football no matter what.
Well, and I agree with you, because Creighton runs basketball just fine with alcohol.
It has for years.
The NCAA has realized, even because it did testing at the College World Series, and realized that everything was almost better by selling alcohol in the stadium and not doing it on the outside.
And again, most places that have done this, if you look at it, they all track alcohol-related events, arrests, so on and so forth. Almost universally, you see a lower number of alcohol-related events because it removes sort of that binge impulse that people have. Hey, we're wrapping up the tailgate. We're heading into the stadium. We're going to pound a couple of beers. We're going to pound that margarita right before we go in because we're not going to have any more until maybe halftime. And so people will binge drink a little bit more if they know they're not going to drink once you get inside the facility.
My whole thing is you keep them inside the stadium. Once you're inside and you're selling alcohol, you don't get to leave at halftime.
And that's the thing. You got to put some restrictions on there. And I think most schools that do this, that is a restriction they build into it.
People may or may not know this, but Dr. Rob every year does a family trip to Florida. I believe it's Sanibel Island.
No, we have gone to Sanibel. We go to St. George.
Okay, but when you see the destruction of Sanibel.
Oh, it's brutal. They got just destroyed.
So did St. George get hit at all?
They did not. So it kind of, just north of Fort Myers, I mean, not even to Tampa, I don't think. It kind of cut northeast across, it went and cut northeast across the state. Did a lot of damage, kind of cutting through Orlando and that central part of the Florida peninsula. back out into the ocean, and then it came back around and slammed into the Carolinas. And so sort of that whole North Florida panhandle section really got spared. And so that was, I mean, a big blessing, especially since my daughter goes to school in Tallahassee. That section almost completely it was a complete miss by the hurricane. We've been to that Sanibel Captiva area a handful of times. Absolutely just got destroyed. I mean, just got devastated.
I had a buddy last year. He's from Omaha. Packed up everything. He ran the Rude Shrimp Company. I don't know if you ever had Rude Shrimp. It was out in the old Waterloo High School. TJ's his name. Him and his wife packed up, went and started Rude Shrimp Company down in Fort Myers. Oh, it's gone. His restaurant is gone.
I mean, so many businesses, homes, everything just got absolutely decimated down there. I mean, the videos that we're seeing now, and I mean, actually, one of my son's teammates at Augustana, their family has a place down there that they just got. And so actually it's a Cedar Falls, Iowa family, but they literally packed up a trailer, loaded it up with a whole bunch of supplies, and are heading down this weekend to try and see if there's anything salvageable at all.
Up next for Nebraska is going to be Rutgers. Got their ass kicked yesterday against Ohio State. Did you see Ryan Day and Greg Schiano get into it?
They kind of kick everybody's ass, but I saw that this morning, which I'll be curious to see what the conversation was, because totally blatant out of bounds hit on an Ohio
cheap
State
shot, man.
Total cheap shot by Rutgers against the Ohio State player. It looked like Schiano was coming across nothing other than to just get his players away from the Ohio State sideline. Next thing you know, Ryan Day are going at it. I really would love to see what the audio was on that. I don't think anybody's got it, but it'd be interesting to see if either coach had anything to say about it.
Yeah, otherwise in college football, I guess the Oklahoma story is just fascinating. Of course, now lost 2 in a row since beating Nebraska.
Everybody does. I'll watch this. Indiana's going to tank now that they've played Nebraska.
Yeah, it's just
the ugliness rubs off on the opponent.
But yeah, just some interesting stuff. Ole Miss over a lot of people. Lane Kiffin was complaining about
Ole
fans.
Miss still looking okay.
They're okay, but a lot of people were like,
they beat who's it? Kentucky.
Yeah.
It was a pretty solid Kentucky team. That was like the SEC version of the Nebraska coaching candidates right there with Lane and Mark Stoops.
Chip Kelly has UCLA unbeaten. They beat Washington.
They beat Washington.
Yeah.
I never thought Chip Kelly was a bad coach. Actually, when he went to the NFL, which I thought was the worst move on the planet.
Yeah, but he was going to be put on probation if he didn't.
Well, there you go. There's always a backstory here with it. But I actually thought he's a great college football coach.
And keep an eye on Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher's going to be under. He could get fired.
Yeah, it's for a team that was sort of like a bubble national title contender this offseason. They don't wait very long down there.
No, they do not. He was hired specifically to win a national championship.
And especially with the recruiting that he supposedly is.
Yes.
I was going to say brought in, but maybe bought in might be the better way to phrase it. I was going to say that's one of those schools that always has a lot of pressure. I get it. This is going back 20 years ago, but when they fired R.C. Slocum, that was kind of like their version of firing Solich. You had this guy who was like a 9-10 win year guy who's going to get you every so often at least an outside shot at playing for a national title. They were going to bowl games. They were getting recruits. They looked good on a national level. And then you fire the guy, and it's been sort of this carousel down there ever since.
I think the interesting game coming up is going to be Oklahoma State and TCU. That's going to be played on the 15th.
Again, right now, not discounting what the Kansas schools are doing, but I think that's sort of the de facto Big 12 title game right there.
I would agree with you 100%. What do you got planned this weekend or this week? Anything?
Back to work, and then, boy, you know what? We got homecoming. We got wrestling tournaments coming up. It's that time of year.
It's busy, busy, busy. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please do so. Just search Doc Talk Sports, give that subscribe, and give this video a like, too, because you're going to be able to see this on YouTube. If you like our Sorry Dave t-shirts, the link
They're
is
fucking awesome.
The link is in the description in Podbean. The link is in the description on YouTube. It's a very simple process. Click, order, and it'll be shipped right to you. It's that simple, and they're high quality. They're not cheap cotton, 100% cotton. These are really, really good t-shirts.
Nice shirts.
And there's 4 options up there, so you can get you buy all 4 if you want. If you really want to impress us, buy all 4.
Post them. Post a picture.
Yeah, and show us your orders. So, again, we were challenged. I said, there's no way you guys are going to sell 40 T-shirts. I think we sell more. I do. I think we sell more
believe.
T-shirts than that. Like our Facebook page. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter.
Subscribe on YouTube.
And subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Travis Creates. Make sure to, when you do your sports betting online, use Betfred Sports. Download the app today. When you need a lawyer, you call Connor Orr. And when you need to buy Husker gear, you go to Husker Hounds. It's that simple. We covered it all today. For Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We'll talk to you next week on the Doc Talk Podcast presented by Betfred Sports.